Sometimes justice does not just show up, it arrives exactly when it needs to, wearing the right robe, sitting behind the right bench, and carrying the weight of every broken promise an insurance company ever made. A woman was sitting in a chemotherapy chair halfway through treatment that was keeping her alive, and a man in a corner office decided her life was not worth the paperwork. What happened next changed everything. If you have ever felt powerless against a system that was supposed to protect you, this story is for you. Subscribe right now and hit that notification bell. We find the stories where real people fought back against those who thought they were untouchable, and we stay until justice is fully delivered. Hit subscribe. Do not miss what happens next. Her name was Margaret Louise Doss. Most people called her Maggie. She was 53 years old, a retired school librarian from Greensboro, North Carolina, who had spent 27 years helping kids fall in love with books. She remembered every student's birthday. She kept a small bowl of hard candy on her desk and let shy kids come in during lunch just to sit and read quietly. She had a golden retriever named Biscuit, a 7-year-old pickup truck with a cracked windshield she kept meaning to fix, and a garden where she grew tomatoes every summer. She wore the same pair of brown leather shoes to church since 2019 because she said they still had good soles, and that was enough. She was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer in early spring. Her oncologist, Dr. Priya Anand, told her that with a full course of aggressive chemotherapy, her 5-year survival rate was close to 70%. Maggie wrote that number on a sticky note and put it on her bathroom mirror. His name was Gerald F. Whitmore. He was Senior Vice President of Claims and Coverage at Pinnacle Health Solutions, a mid-sized insurance company headquartered in Raleigh, North Carolina, with over 400,000 policyholders across the Southeast. Gerald was 58 years old and wore custom-tailored suits his assistant once admitted cost over $3,000 each. He drove a silver Porsche Cayenne and wore a Rolex Submariner that caught the light every time he gestured, which was often because Gerald liked to be watched when he talked. He lived in a 6-bedroom house in a gated community called Falcon Ridge and had a standing Friday reservation at a steakhouse where the cheapest item was a $42 side salad. Inside Pinnacle, colleagues called his management style aggressive cost containment. That was a polished way of saying he found reasons to deny claims others might have approved. He had a plaque on his wall. It said results driven. He had been named the company's top cost containment executive 3 years running. Maggie had been enrolled in Pinnacle through her late husband's retirement plan for 11 years without a single lapse. She had never filed a major claim before the cancer diagnosis. When Dr. Anand submitted the treatment plan in early April, Pinnacle approved the first 4 cycles without any issue. Then, on September 14th at 10:17 in the morning, while Maggie sat in a reclining chair at the Greensboro Cancer Treatment Center with an IV line in her left arm and a heated blanket across her lap, her phone rang. A Pinnacle representative told her, reading from a script, that her continued chemotherapy had been reviewed by their internal medical team and determined to be not medically necessary. Effective immediately, Pinnacle would no longer cover her treatment. Her remaining 6 cycles would cost $114,000 out of pocket. The nurse in the room, Sandra Teal, had been doing this job for 18 years. She said she had never seen anything like it. She said Maggie sat completely still for 90 seconds with the IV still in her arm. Then she quietly asked Sandra to hand her a tissue. What made the denial more than just bad business was the justification. When Dr. Anand appealed and asked for specific medical reasoning, she received a 2-page letter signed personally by Gerald F. Whitmore. He wrote that based on current actuarial modeling and internal cost-benefit review, the continued treatment did not represent a sound investment of plan resources given the patient's age and current prognosis stage. Sound investment. He used those words about a woman's life. Dr. Anand later testified she read the letter 3 times because she could not believe it the first 2. When she confronted a Pinnacle representative by phone and the call was escalated to Whitmore directly, he said clearly into a recorded line, "Doctor, with all due respect, we are an insurance company, not a charity. Our job is financial risk management. Her policy has limits. She has reached a threshold. That is not personal. That is just math." "That is just math," said into a recording. about a woman in a chemotherapy chair. Before we go further, this channel exists because stories like Maggie's deserve more than a 3-day outrage cycle. They deserve to be told completely, from the first wrong to the final gavel, so the people who fight back get the recognition they earn. If you believe accountability matters and ordinary people deserve to be heard, subscribe to this channel right now. We do this work every single week. Join a community that does not look away. Subscribe and be part of that mission. Dr. Anand did not let it go. Neither did Maggie's daughter, Christine, a 31-year-old paralegal from Charlotte who drove 4 hours the morning after the denial just to sit with her mother. Christine contacted the North Carolina Department of Insurance, the State Medical Board, and a consumer protection attorney named David R. Holloway, who had spent 20 years fighting insurance companies and won $11 million in settlements over the past 3 years alone. Holloway took the case immediately. He said that when he read the letter with the phrase sound investment, he had not felt that kind of anger about a document since his very first case. Within 2 weeks, Holloway had filed a formal complaint with the Department of Insurance and a civil lawsuit naming Pinnacle Health Solutions and Gerald F. Whitmore personally, not just as a company representative, by name, as an individual human being. That distinction meant Gerald could not disappear behind a corporate shield. Senior investigator Teresa L. Monroe was assigned to the state case, and through a subpoena she obtained Pinnacle's internal communications. What she found transformed the case entirely. There were emails sent the week before the denial in which Whitmore explicitly wrote that they needed to identify high-cost ongoing claims among the 50-plus demographic and find policy language to support denial. Not find out if denial is justified. Find language to support a decision already made. He started with the outcome and worked backward to manufacture a reason. That is not claims review. That is fraud. The North Carolina Attorney General's office opened a criminal investigation. Now the case had 3 layers: civil lawsuit, state regulatory proceeding, criminal fraud charges. The criminal case went to Guilford County Superior Court before the Honorable Judge Raymond K. Okafor. Gerald arrived on the morning of January 22nd in a dark charcoal suit worth enough that you noticed it from across the lobby. His attorney, Bradley Hurst, from a 4-partner Charlotte firm, walked slightly ahead of him like a guide showing someone around a museum they already owned. Gerald's hands were in his pockets. He nodded at journalists outside. An actual nod, with a faint smile, the way a man does when he believes he is the most competent person in every room he enters. Maggie arrived 40 minutes earlier. She wore a navy blue dress Christine had helped her choose and her brown leather shoes. Her head was covered with a soft gray wrap because she had lost her hair during the first phase of chemotherapy. She walked slowly, holding Christine's arm. She looked straight ahead. She did not glance at cameras. She did not acknowledge the journalists. She just walked forward with complete quiet dignity, sat in her assigned seat, folded her hands in her lap, and waited. Do you believe that a man with a Rolex and a corporate title should be able to call a woman's cancer treatment just math? If the answer is no, this channel is your channel. Subscribe right now. We are building a community that stays until the last word, until the verdict, until the gavel falls. This story is not over yet. Subscribe and stay with us. David Holloway's opening was 45 minutes of organized, methodical devastation. He walked the jury through 11 years of Maggie's on-time premium payments totaling over $62,000. He showed the original treatment approval. He showed the internal emails with Whitmore's directive. He showed the letter with sound investment printed in plain black ink. He put each document on the screen and read it aloud so the jury heard every word inside that room. Dr. Anand testified about what interrupting chemotherapy mid-cycle does to a patient. She explained that the 70% survival figure she had given Maggie was based entirely on completing the full course without interruption. She said, "When her treatment was stopped, we did not just pause her recovery. We introduced new risk into her body at a time when her immune system was already compromised. Every week of delay mattered." She said it steadily, looking at the jury, and the courtroom went completely silent. Sandra Teal testified in blue scrubs because she had come straight from her shift. She described those 90 seconds. She said Maggie did not cry right away. She said Maggie looked at the IV in her arm and then said very quietly, "I was almost halfway there." Sandra's voice broke when she repeated those words. The juror in the second seat on the left was crying openly before Sandra finished her sentence. Christine Doss took the stand and held herself together until she described finding her mother at the kitchen table the morning after the denial. Maggie had been holding the sticky note from the bathroom mirror, the one that said 70%. Christine said her mother looked up and said, "They took my number away, Chrissy. They took my number." Christine had to stop speaking. The judge gave her all the time she needed. "We are past the halfway point of this story, and I want to stop and thank you sincerely. You stayed through every piece of testimony. You gave these people your full attention, and they deserved it. If this channel has ever made you feel less alone in believing that people deserve better, please subscribe. Your subscription is not just a click. It is a vote for the kind of content that takes justice seriously. Thank you for being here. Subscribe and help us keep doing this work." Bradley Hearst spent the first defense day arguing that Pinnacle's internal review was legitimate and Whitmore had acted within professional authority. The argument was technically assembled but emotionally hollow, and the jury's faces showed it. They had already heard Sandra Teal's voice break. No policy language was undoing that. When Whitmore himself took the stand, he wore a slightly lighter suit, softer, as if his attorney had coached him to seem more approachable. He talked about actuarial models, fiduciary responsibilities, and risk thresholds. He used the word "unfortunately" multiple times, always followed by a justification rather than an apology. When Holloway asked him directly whether he felt personal responsibility for what happened to Margaret Doss, Whitmore paused and then said, "I feel responsibility to the company and to the 400,000 other policyholders whose premiums fund that company. I made a decision based on available information. I stand by the process." He stands by the process. A woman lost 4 months of cancer treatment. He stands by the process. The juror in the second seat had stopped crying by then. She looked like something had permanently hardened inside her. Now I need to tell you something about Judge Raymond K. Okafor before we reach the sentencing, because what he said makes far more sense when you understand who he is. Judge Okafor was 61 years old with 16 years on the bench. He was known for precision and fairness, not drama or performance. He did not make speeches for cameras, so when he chose to speak the way he spoke that day, everyone in the room understood it was real. What most people did not know was that his younger sister, Adaize, had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer 8 years earlier. During her treatment, her insurance provider had delayed authorization for a critical follow-up scan for 11 weeks, bouncing her between departments that each claimed the other was responsible. By the time the scan happened, her cancer had advanced to stage 4. Adaize Okafor died 14 months later. She was 44 years old. She had 2 children. The judge said none of this with drama. He said it the way someone speaks a truth they have carried quietly for years. He said, "I am not here today because of my sister. I am here because the law brought me here. But I will not pretend I do not understand exactly what was taken from Margaret Doss and her family." Then he proceeded. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. When foreperson Walter Gibbs, a retired high school principal, read the verdicts, the courtroom held its breath between each one. Guilty on insurance fraud. Guilty on willful endangerment through denial of medically necessary care. Guilty on conspiracy to defraud a policyholder. Gerald Whitmore sat completely still through all 3. Bradley Hearst placed his hand on the table, but not on his client's arm. Gerald stared forward. For the first time in the entire trial, he did not look like the most competent person in the room. He looked like a man who had just felt the floor disappear beneath him. Maggie closed her eyes when the third verdict was read. Christine gripped her mother's hand. David Holloway allowed himself exactly 3 seconds of closed eyes before he turned back to face the bench. "Are you still with us? We are about to reach the moment this entire story has been building toward, the sentencing. The part where a judge who had heard everything, seen everything, and carried his own grief for years, decided what justice actually looks like. Subscribe to this channel right now if you want to see what happens when the law is used exactly the way it was meant to be used. Subscribe. Do not leave now. Judge Okafor took a slow breath. He had a legal pad in front of him, but barely looked at it. He looked at Gerald Whitmore. He said, "I am ordering you to pay a financial penalty of $850,000 directed in full to the Margaret L. Doss Cancer Treatment Fund, a trust established in her name at the Greensboro Cancer Treatment Center to cover her remaining treatment and any ongoing medical costs resulting from the period her care was unlawfully interrupted. This is not a fine paid to a government account. This money goes directly into the hands of the woman your decision endangered, every single dollar of it." He continued, "I am also ordering the permanent revocation of your professional certification and licensing authority within the state of North Carolina, with a formal recommendation to the National Association of Insurance Commissioners that this revocation be recorded and considered by any state where you seek future licensure. You will not sit in another office making these decisions about other people's lives, not in this state, not without every future employer knowing exactly what happened in this courtroom." Then he said, "And there is one more thing. You will perform 2,000 hours of community service, specifically and exclusively at cancer treatment facilities in North Carolina, beginning within 30 days of today. You will sit in the waiting rooms. You will see the patients. You will interact with the staff. You will file written reports every 60 days with this court. You will also write and publish a formal essay of no less than 3,000 words in a professional insurance industry publication under your full name, describing what you did, why it was wrong, and what must change. You will not pay someone else to write it. This court will verify authorship." Then Judge Okafor set down his legal pad and looked directly at Gerald Whitmore. "Mr. Whitmore, you spent 30 years in an industry that exists because people are afraid of illness, afraid of the moment their body fails them. They pay their premiums faithfully because they are buying a promise that when the worst happens, they will not face it alone. Margaret Doss paid that premium for 11 years. She held up her end completely. You did not hold up yours. You looked at a woman in a chemotherapy chair and you calculated her. You put her life through a spreadsheet and decided it did not pencil out. You used the word investment. You used the word math. You stood in this courtroom and said you stand by the process. I want you to understand something clearly. The process failed. You failed. And the word I am going to use is not math. The word is cruelty, dressed in actuarial language, filed in triplicate, and signed by a man in a $3,000 suit, but cruelty nonetheless. The courtroom was absolutely still. You have family here today. I see them. I will only say this. The people we love do not always show us who they are in their best moments. Sometimes we learn who they are in moments like this one. What your family does with what they have learned today is their own journey. I hope it is a meaningful one. This sentence is not designed to destroy you. It is designed to teach you something that 30 years in insurance never did, that behind every claim number is a human being who is scared. And scared human beings deserve to have their promises kept. If you stayed through every word of this story, I want to ask you something. What does it mean to you that a judge stood in a North Carolina courtroom and said the word cruelty out loud and connected it directly to a man who had hidden behind business language for decades? Stories like this one need people who care enough to stay until the end. Subscribe to this channel and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. We will keep finding these stories. Subscribe now. Gerald's legal team filed an appeal within 30 days. They argued prosecutorial overreach and that the community service requirement was unconstitutionally punitive. The North Carolina Court of Appeals reviewed every element and upheld the sentence completely. The written opinion specifically noted that the community service requirement was rehabilitative, not punitive, and that the financial penalty directed to Maggie's treatment fund was both proportionate and appropriate. Pinnacle Health Solutions also settled a parallel regulatory proceeding with the Department of Insurance for $2.4 million, establishing a fund for other policyholders who had faced similar denials. North Carolina also passed new regulation requiring that any denial of ongoing treatment for a life-threatening illness must be reviewed and signed by a licensed physician, not an actuarial team alone. That regulation is now called the Continuity of Care Assurance Rule. Maggie resumed chemotherapy on February 28th. Dr. Annan designed a modified protocol to account for the gap. It was harder than the original plan. The gap had done some of what Dr. Annan feared. But Maggie sat back down in that chair. Christine drove from Charlotte and sat beside her. Sandra Teal was working that day and came in on her break to bring Maggie a cup of hot tea without being asked. She set it down, squeezed Maggie's hand once, and went back to work. Maggie said later that when the drip started again, she thought about that sticky note, the one that said 70%. She thought about how someone had tried to take that number from her, and she thought about how the law had given it back. Gerald Whitmore showed up for his first community service shift at the Guilford County Cancer Support Clinic on March 15th. He arrived in a car that was not the Porsche. He wore a plain jacket. He was assigned to help patients with intake forms and assist in the family waiting area. Volunteer coordinator Rosa Medina said he was very quiet that first day. She said he spent 45 minutes helping an older man fill out his insurance paperwork without being asked. The man thanked him warmly, not knowing who he was or why he was there. Rosa said Gerald looked at the man for a moment and then said, "I am glad I could help." She did not know if he meant it that day, but he kept showing up every scheduled hour. By his 6th month, he sometimes stayed an extra hour after his required time ended. Rosa saw him once sitting beside a woman in the waiting room who was crying. He was not touching her or speaking, just sitting close enough that she would not be alone. Rosa said, "I do not know what happened to him in that courtroom, but something changed." He completed his essay at 17 months. It was published in the Journal of Insurance Practice and Management. The title was What I Got Wrong. He wrote it himself. I think about this case often, not just the verdict or the sentence. I think about the 90 seconds. The 90 seconds Maggie sat in that chair with the IV in her arm after the call ended. 90 seconds of silence from a woman who had spent 27 years helping children fall in love with words. What does a person think in 90 seconds like that? I think about it more than I can fully explain. I think about what it costs a person to live in a body the world keeps trying to reduce to a number. I think about what it means that we built a system where a man in a Rolex could make that call legally, routinely, as part of a job he was celebrated for doing. And I think about what it means that the same system built a courtroom, a judge, and a set of laws that said, "No, not this time, not her. That matters. It has to matter, because the alternative is that we accept the math, and I am not willing to accept the math." To anyone watching this who has ever sat in a waiting room holding an insurance folder that felt heavier than anything you had carried, who has ever heard a voice on the phone read from a script while your heart broke quietly, I want you to know something. You are not a number, you are not a threshold, you are not a cost-benefit analysis. Your life has value that cannot be entered into any spreadsheet. Your fear is real, your fight is real. The people who reduce you to a line item are wrong, not just following procedure, wrong. And this story is proof that the law knows the difference. You matter, your name matters. Your sticky note on the bathroom mirror matters. And to anyone watching who holds the power to approve or deny, to cover or refuse, I am asking you to stop and think about what you are actually doing, not the policy, not the model, what you are actually doing. You are deciding whether a scared human being gets the help they were promised. You are the last stop before abstraction becomes a real life or a real death. Remember the 90 seconds. Remember the woman on the other end of your decision has a number on her bathroom mirror that means everything to her. Make the right choice, because if you do not, there is a courtroom somewhere with your name on it, and a judge who is not interested in your process. Thank you for watching this entire story. Thank you for staying through every word, every piece of testimony, every moment in that courtroom. Thank you for caring about Maggie Doss, a woman you had never heard of before today who grew tomatoes and helped kids find books they loved and kept wearing her good shoes because they still had soles, and she was not a woman who wasted things that still had value. She deserved your full attention. You gave it to her. That means something real. Subscribe to this channel and join our family. Not because we ask at the end of every video, but because this community is built on something real. We are not here for outrage that burns 3 days and disappears. We are here for the full story, from the first wrong to the last gavel, from the injustice to the sentence to the quiet moment in a waiting room where something changes in a person who caused harm. We are here because we believe justice is not a highlight clip. It is a process, and the process deserves witnesses. Every story we tell here is one that someone tried to keep quiet. Every view, every subscription, every share says, "We see this. We are not looking away. We are building a community that believes in accountability, in the dignity of ordinary people, in the power of the law when it is used the way it was meant to be used. We believe a librarian in worn brown shoes matters exactly as much as a man in a $3,000 suit. We believe 70% is worth fighting for. We believe 90 seconds of silence deserves years of consequence. Subscribe right now. Join us. Stand with us. Fight with us for justice, for compassion, for every promise ever made to a person who paid faithfully and hoped they would never need to collect. Subscribe and let us build the world we want to live in together. The world where Maggie Doss gets her number back. Starting now.